Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortified Life podcast, where we are passionate about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. Every week, we have the opportunity to bring on authors, speakers, CEOs, leaders of nonprofits who are also passionate about putting God back in business. And, folks, as you know, every week, it's no different. I have to tell you, folks, this individual, our guest today, uh, I had heard about her through another faith and work group, and just a little bit of time that I have been talking to her, getting to know her. It's like she's like somebody that you've known for a long time, even though I haven't known her that long. Part of that is just being brothers and sister in Christ. But folks, our guest today is Lori Béen. She's the owner of paNASH Career Coaching Service, possesses 25 years of experience as a career coach, background in both private practice and college career services at universities such as Vanderbilt and Belmont. She's authored several books, including the Amazon #1 bestseller, Purposeful Branding, discovering how your gifts can help you get unstuck in your career and best serve others. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Lori's also been published in the Huffington Post and Inc. magazine. She's been featured in the Wall Street Journal. And this is a big one, folks. For the eighth consecutive year since 2017, Lori's been ranked in the top 10 best coaches in Nashville. So you have got a polished, grace filled individual on the show with you that's been divvying out wisdom and knowledge for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fortified Life, Lori Béen. Lori, what's going on?
Hey, Jason, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited. I'm honored to be a part of your podcast. I love what you're doing. I love the topic that you cover and just excited to be here.
For sure, Lori. Well, Lori, let's jump in because we're having so much excitement offline. So let's bring it online for the listeners. Lori, we know that you just didn't wake up in 2025 doing what you're doing, right? We know there's a story, there's a
Yeah.
journey that, social media and all the awards and people get so excited, but there's a story behind it. How did you get to what you're doing today in 2025? Give us the kind of the professional bio on how we got here.
Sure, yes. Thank you for asking that. I'm probably one of a handful of career coaches who've been doing it their entire career. A lot of career coaches come into it after having done something else prior in their career, especially if they were in HR, which is a great perspective to have. But mine's a little different. So I've been doing career coaching, I say, since the turn of the century, which makes me sound really old. Uh, but since 1999 is when I first started. But if you go back even a little further, I actually started when I was in grad school, when I volunteered in the Career Center at my graduate school. And that's kind of how it worked out because when I was in college and undergrad, I worked in the provost's office and one of the dean's offices, and I also served as orientation leader on campus. And I was just like, I really like working on a college campus. I don't want to leave college yet. So what do I do? How do I get a job where I get to stay here and do what all these people that are here serving me as a student, how do I get to do what they do? And I remember I went to my dean of students and I asked him, how do I get a job like yours? And that was my very first informational interview. Didn't know that's what it was called at the time and did not do it appropriately, but just asked him, how do I get a job like yours? I'm not trying to take your job, but would like to do something like that and be able to work on a college campus. And, he told me, well, you'll need a master's degree to do that at least. And so I started looking at programs and found a program at the University of South Carolina. It's the oldest program in higher ed administration,
Oh, wow.
one of the best ones. And so I was like, well, I want to go to the best. And it was not too far from where I was from. I'm originally from North Carolina. And so I went to school there and studied a lot of different areas within higher education administration. That's all of the things outside of the classroom. you've got your financial aid, Greek life, housing, all those services that serve the students when they're not in the classroom. And I had three areas of interest. One was student orientation, freshman orientation,
Hmm.
uh, also freshman seminar
Oh.
course. Yeah. And then career services. So anything that really was helping students in transition, whether they were coming into college or leaving college, that was my area of interest. And so I got to do a lot of internships, graduate assistantships, practica, and I volunteered. And one of the places I volunteered was the Career Center, and that's when I got the bug for career services. And so when I finished my master's, I went on to do that in college career services and stayed there for about 10 to 12 years. And then started feeling my creativity being stifled, and was just ready for something not necessarily different in terms of what I did for a living, but in
Hmm.
a different way, or for a different population. And so that's when I left higher ed to start my own um, consulting coaching business. And I living in Nashville, I thought, who needs help with making transitions into new careers? Who can benefit from the skills I have? And so I started a career coaching slash image consulting business.
Hmm.
And a lot of my clients at that time were up and coming recording artists, which was a really fun
Wow.
population to work with. Yeah, it's very interesting. And worked with them for 8 years. And then after that, decided to just solely focus on career coaching. So I trimmed that image consulting service out of my business to focus solely on the career coaching. And now I work with people who are anywhere, any point in their career, but mostly after they've been in the workforce for a little while. I
Okay.
work with people who realize that the ladder they've been climbing has been leaning against the wrong wall.
Mm.
They want to make a career change. I work with people who are just wanting to change companies but still do the same type of work. I work with people who've been laid off. They were forced into a career change to help them find their next thing. So that's kind of where I've been and how I've gotten to where I am.
Wow. Lori, there were so many things coming to mind as you were saying that. Thank you for your transparency. Now, Lori, the first question, very important.
Mhm.
I feel like you mentioned North Carolina
Okay.
and South Carolina,
Yep.
and we are both you and I are in SEC and ACC territory. So the
Yes,
first
we
question
are.
is, how in the world did you even navigate that? Being from North Carolina, which there's two blue schools there, to kind of going over to
Yeah.
SC and then even being in Nashville now where Vandy is at. How did you even, it's just a fun one for the
Yeah.
audience. 'Cause I would
Yes.
imagine there were some friends and family that maybe might have raised an eyebrow or two somewhere in that
Yeah,
process.
well, it was a weird transition going to the University of South Carolina, being a University of North Carolina fan my whole life, because
Mm,
there in South Carolina, in Columbia, they refer to it as Carolina. Now,
right.
anything outside of there, we know Carolina refers to the University of North Carolina. So that was a big adjustment because I would hear, "Oh, Carolina lost last night." I'm like, "No, they didn't. They won." So that was a big shift and change in my mindset. And also, I grew up watching basketball.
Hmm.
Carolina, that was what I loved. I didn't know much about football because number one, my high school football team was never very good, at least not when
Got
I
it.
was there. And then my undergraduate, we didn't have a football team at that time. I went to UNC Charlotte, and that's before they got.
Mm.
So it was a huge introduction to college football, SEC, when I got to the University of South Carolina. I was like, oh, this is kind of like almost as big as basketball is in North Carolina. So yes.
So, Lloyd, what you're telling me is part of your career and life journey is learning how to manage conflict, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picking up between North Carolina basketball territory with Duke and UNC, and then moving over to South Carolina and all the SEC rivalries, and then even the interstate one, Clemson and Carolina there. So
Yeah.
I'm picking up what you're putting down,
Yeah,
Lori.
I
I'm
will
picking
pull
it up.
for Clemson before I will pull for Duke, if that
Got
gives
it.
you any idea. And I know you
That
played for
does.
Georgia Tech,
I
right?
did. I did. See, folks, this could be a whole other show. But I just wanted to say that was one of the first things I noticed as you were telling. It's like, man, how did she do that? I, I was like, there's some things to be discussed when we go from North Carolina to South Carolina. So thank you. Folks, that was just a fun one I
Yeah.
wanted to ask her about.
Yeah.
Another big one, Lori, that I don't want people to miss. You said you came to a conclusion that your creativity was
Mhm.
being stifled. And especially because you work with so many different types of career changers,
Mhm.
how important is that, Lori, to understand A, that it's happening, and then B, once you understand it's happening, what to do next? Because creativity plays a big part of, our career and what we're doing. So,
Yeah.
how did you kind of come to that conclusion and navigate what to do next? Because I feel like a lot of people hit uh that milestone per se in their
Right.
own career. So what's your wisdom there on, like, how did you work through it, and how do you kind of work with other people if they say that type of language?
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't hard for me to realize it was happening because I just felt like my hands were being
Mm,
tied, and that's not a comfortable feeling.
right.
And I didn't, I was trying to be hopeful and trying to see, okay, like trying to present opportunities or create opportunities for myself to be creative.
Hmm.
But then when they kept being, again, stifled is just the best word I can think of. Then I knew it's like, okay, something needs to change because that's one of my skills that I feel like I have to use to
Hmm.
feel I'm productive and to be fulfilled. It may not be as strong for other people, but for me, it was like, okay, yeah, I got to do that. I gotta make a shift. And I was applying to other jobs, but I wasn't ready to move. I didn't want to leave Nashville. I'd just come to Nashville like a year or two before. And so I wanted to stay in Nashville. And so I was looking for some other jobs doing the same thing in higher education. There are a lot of universities here in Nashville. So there were, some opportunities, but none of them just really fit. And
Mm.
then I just started asking myself, okay, who here in Nashville needs the skills that I have? Um, and I had friends at the time who were encouraging me. They're like, oh, you're great with wardrobe styling. You ought to do some image consulting or provide that service. Like, yeah, that sounds like fun. That helps create, or that helps scratch that creative itch. But at the same time, I wanted to use the skills I had in preparing people for job interviews, the job search, or what have you. And I'd also had a little bit of background in the past of doing some media coaching. I was like, who
Mm.
needs this kind of thing? So that's when I realized, okay, these up and coming recording artists, people who are moving to Nashville every day to follow their dreams, to be creative themselves in their own way, they need some guidance because a lot of them are very young.
Hmm.
Some of them are still in high school and they don't know how to meet with a label. They don't know how to
Mm.
give a radio interview. So, and then they need to know what their image is and how it relates to their music. Is it going to be authentic? Because that's what people want. And so that's where I kind of shifted my focus and decided to start my own image consulting and career coaching business, working primarily with recording artists. I had only one contact in the music industry at the time. Uh,
Wow.
I started following my own advice that I'd given my college students about networking and built that network. That industry, it takes a lot longer to build a network because people are very guarded,
Hmm.
rightfully so in a lot of ways, in that industry. And so, but yeah, I started doing that. I started my business part-time while still working full-time
Hmm.
in the career center I was at. And then 9 months later, I met someone in the music industry who he was like, Lori, it's never going to be the right time for you to leave your full-time job and start this and go full-time with it. But he was willing to provide a safety net for me, which was really
Mm.
nice. He let me use office space on Music Row that he had. I
Wow.
provided some administrative support for his office in exchange. And then he also gave me access to his contacts, which grew my network pretty big, pretty quickly too at that time. And so the agreement was just to do that for 3 months to help me kind of, make that jump, make that leap. And then after that 3 months, I felt more confident to go on my own once that was up and started doing it full time. And yeah, it was great. And I spent a lot of, I spent those 8 years in the music industry really learning a lot. But then I got to a point where it was like, okay, I want to go back to my roots and focus more on the career coaching. And it's interesting too, Jason, because when all of that happened, when I decided to leave my full-time job with benefits, that was August of 2008. That was right
Mm.
before the economy.
Right. I was like, I know what happened back around
Yeah.
that time.
Yes. And so if I had waited to leave my job, I would have been too afraid to at that point with what was happening.
Mm.
And so the image consulting business, I had people coming to me for career coaching too. That's why I provided that service along with the image consulting because people were losing their jobs and people had not had to write a resume in 20 years. Like, I don't know where to start. So I
Wow.
was helping them. I was helping like people in radio, people in the music industry, not just the recording artists, but the people who worked in it who were losing their job. So that's what I did for those 8 years um, before just really focusing on helping people pursue their passions.
That is amazing, Lori. And I feel like, especially with past guests, this question always comes up. It's like, wait a minute. Okay, you worked at a university working with students. Got it. But wait a minute. Now I'm working with musicians, and then I'm talking image
Yeah.
consulting. But it's interesting because you talked about how those skills blended together and you were still able to use them, because a lot of times, especially when you have someone going from corporate to entrepreneurship or vice versa, they're like, I did that in another life. But those that really, at least I've found, Lori, who really maximize the totality of their experience, they're able to fold in what
Yeah.
they've done at different stops along the way. And so I just love that how when you gave the example of the artist, they didn't even know how to meet with media or whatnot. I mean, that's easily transferable to, hey, if you're sitting in a interview, or what to wear to an interview, or
Yeah.
because it's still, that's their version of an interview, even though it's kind of with a media context. But if you're sitting in front of, VP, hiring manager, and you got a t-shirt on, and it's like, I don't really know if they're going to be a good fit for.
Yes, and it was interesting because I said, I've gotten some media interview coaching previously, and how that happened was when I started working at a university in North Carolina that had a preliminary to the Miss America pageant.
Hmm.
They asked me, can you prepare our contestants for the interview phase of competition? I'm like, I don't know anything about pageants.
Wow.
Been in one. They're like, but interviews. And so,
Mm.
and what I was doing, I realized in preparing them for those interviews was really preparing for whoever won to be able to do media interviews and be able to
Wow.
answer questions off the top of their head and that sort of thing. So that's where that came from. And I was able to weave that in as well. And to answer the rest of your question about how would someone else go about doing this, everyone's different. Everyone
Mm.
they're at different stages in their life. Not everyone can just start, leave their job and start their own thing. But that's something I like helping people with, figuring out, okay, what kind of strategy can we start looking at now, even if now's not the right time,
Hmm.
to make sure that you're ready when the time comes. And one of the main things, like I was talking about, was who can you serve? How do
Mm.
your skills serve other people? Who are those people that need those skills? I think if you're looking at who first instead of yourself, that makes a huge difference. And that's what my book is all about, helping you learn how to best serve others and who are those others.
Love it. As they say in church, Lori, that will preach. Uh, and you have provided the perfect segue for us, Lori, because let's dive in, folks. Lori has written a wonderful book, Purposeful Branding. I have the digital copy myself, but Lori, if you've got it, you can see it in her background. The blue, I
Yeah.
call it the blue book, Purposeful Branding. Lori, let's get into. Um, what came to mind with creating this work? What inspired you to write Purposeful Branding, and how did your personal journey shape the message of the book?
Yeah, so it came from actually working with the recording artists. When I would work with recording artists, whether they were young or old, or middle, middle of the road, what have you, I would ask them, the first question I would ask them would be, what makes you different from all the other talented people here in Nashville? Because you can't say, oh, I'm different because I'm talented. That doesn't work here in Nashville because everybody here is talented. But what
Right.
makes you different from other people trying to do what you're trying to do? And a lot of them either didn't know the answer or they couldn't articulate it. So we'd have to back up a little bit. It's like, I really want to work with you to help you uh, understand what it is that you bring to the table so that we're creating your image in a way that's authentic and true to you and to your music and helping them articulate that, whether it is through a meeting with a label or through an interview on the radio or what have you. And so that process actually is what turned into this purposeful branding process that I take my clients through now.
Mm,
And that's what you get in this book is the exact thing I take my clients through. And the exercises I've created from came from that experience. And I've had, clients, the artists in the past say to me, this doesn't just help me in my music career, this helps me in my personal life too. Uh,
mm,
and that's the intention behind it. And I feel like it's something that God just kind of dropped in my lap. And then I was able after that to even take this. God used this for me to take to a mission trip that I took to Brazil to the
mm,
Amazon jungle, where I went with the church, a local church here that does a conference every year with pastors from all the various jungles in the Amazon region. And teaching them about, like helping them determine like what is the mission of your church and
mm.
how do you articulate it? Um, so it's been used there. It's been used on Music Row. It's been used with my clients. So that's interesting to see how God has where all He's taken it.
My goodness, Lori, I love it. I love it. Lori, as you know, for the skeptics out there that are like, well, isn't all this marketing, branding, mumbo jumbo the same at the end of the day? So for that skeptic that's out there, Lori, how do you define purposeful branding, and how does that, speaking of differentiating
Mhm.
yourself, how is that different from maybe what people traditionally think about with branding?
Yeah, well, I think the purposeful branding it starts with again, what gifting has God given you?
Mm,
Uh, what are your strengths? What are your skills? And how do they fit together to serve others best? That's what it really boils down to in terms of difference.
mm. That's huge. And Lori, I've just run into so many people. I think about like Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. The why kind of dictates the what and the how, and that's essentially what you're saying. Like, hey, let's step back for a second before we start diving into, well, let me go do this, and do I use a green color scheme over red? Which that actually is another thing I wanted to bring up, Lori, because a lot of people, when they think branding, they automatically start getting into logos and all that. What's kind of the drawback to putting branding in that box of logos and visuals?
I think you forget about the people you're serving. Again, your eyes
Mm,
back on you and your business. And it really is about, yes, Simon Sinek rightfully so asks why. Uh,
mm,
and then you get to the how and then the what, but you can't forget about the who. And
yeah.
something I focus on in my book is, how do you determine who your audience is? And that's a hard one for a lot of people to answer until we start working together. But it really boils down to, okay, what void do you fill? What void do your skills fill, and how do they best serve others? And I think a lot of times people have a hard time realizing what skills they have just because they assume if it's something that comes easy to them, it comes easy to everybody else.
Mm.
But pay
Wow.
attention to the things that come easy to you, because that's probably where you can help others best.
Mm. I love it. Read the tea leaves, as they I like that. Now, Lori, as I look at the outline of the book, there was a major statement in the beginning. So you have like getting started, and then we get into the branding. But I will tell you, and what immediately grabbed my attention, your work is not your identity. What? Wait a minute. Like pause. Like out the gate. I feel like that's like a whoo. So in a not just the statement, but unpack that for us because I mean, every person's probably dealt with an aspect of that. If we're not careful, our work can become our identity. So just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, well, I think as Christians, we know that our identity is in Christ, and if we start making our work our identity, we're making it an idol, and we have to really check that. And so, I think with you have so many different roles in your life,
Hmm.
that might be what you do, but it's not what you are. And then you also have different assignments throughout life, whether it's, you don't have the same job throughout life. We know that most people change their careers, not just their jobs, but their careers 7 to 10 times in their lifetime. But then you also might have the job of caregiver or parent or what have you. And so those life changes, those seasons in life, it does change. So you can't base your identity on any of those things because they are changing so quickly. But we know that God doesn't change.
Mm. Come on now, Lori. You're gonna get me excited. Don't have me running around the room now. Lori, there's unlimited application with books. From for you, from the author's heart, what's maybe the top one or two things you'd like a reader to take away from reading your book?
I think that main point that we just discussed, you don't
Okay,
ever forget that your identity is in Christ, and your
that's
work is
good.
not what makes you who you are. And that's especially important for people who maybe have lost their jobs, to
Mm,
remember that. You may have lost your job, but you've not lost your ability to work, and that's not what defines you.
yeah. Very, very well stated, Lori. That is huge. Now, folks, I originally learned about Lori through FCCI, so she's talking about God, Jesus, Jesus, God, and all these things in business. But obviously, God is a central part of that. So, Lori, just talk about some of the other work that you do, and it going around as a speaker, and your book being used as a resource. Talk about some of those other endeavors. Hint, hint. That's a little joke from offline, folks. But talk about some of the other faith and work initiatives that God has graced you to be part of.
Yes. So I don't do a whole lot of speaking, but I do like to come on podcasts like yours and talk one-on-one with you as other people are listening in. I've done speaking. I'll do it. I'm not a fan of it because I do prefer working with people one-on-one and getting to know the
Hmm.
person in front of me. But one of the things right now, well, let me back up a little bit. So I talked a little bit about how God used this whole purposeful branding process
Hmm.
in my mission trip to the Amazon. Um, and then also being involved in Fellowship of Companies for Christ, that has
Yeah.
been so instrumental in helping me with my business and also being able to help other people in their own business. I've also been involved in, I think we were talking offline before we started this. I was in the National Institute of Faith and Works program it's called the Gotham program, which came out of Tim Keller's church, Redeemer Church in Manhattan. And so that was something that taught me about, the importance of and how God and our faith works in
Hmm.
our work. So yeah, and right now I'm just my church here in Nashville is starting um, a new ministry based on vocation, and they pulled me in to help with that. And it's we're at the very beginning stages. We've just had one meeting, so I'm excited to see how that's going to turn out.
Very, very cool, Lori. I could talk to you a whole other 3 hours on that, but folks, we can't keep Lori here for
Yeah.
that long. But Lori, that's just powerful. And I mentioned the hint about endeavor. So the late Tim Keller, awesome book, Every Good Endeavor. You should definitely check out that
Yeah,
resource when you get a chance. One of my favorite books on this topic.
it's a great
Um,
one.
it really is. Um, so Lori, as we're coming to the end of the summer, right? You know, you hit August and, and September, but is there anything exciting coming up event wise, project, new direction that you want to let the listeners know about?
Yes. Well, in addition to that ministry program at my church, I'm excited about that. But also within my business, I am something that God has been putting on my heart to start as a program for Christian women who want
Mm,
to learn how to start their own business so that they aren't working for someone else and putting money in that person's pocket, but instead putting it back directly into their own home and their own family. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet because I'm at the very beginning of that right now. But I am developing this out of obedience to God's calling.
mhm.
And I'm sure He will guide it. And once it's fully developed and ready to go, I'd love to come back on your show and talk about it.
Oh,
It's like at that
it's
point.
already done, Lori. You
Okay,
just we don't
good.
there folks, just like they say in the Marvel movies, so such and such will return for the sequel. Look, Lori Bean will return to the Fortified. Just know that. So
Yeah.
Lori, let's go ahead and get that off the table.
Yeah.
She will be back for sure. No
Yeah,
question.
I think it's so important. You know, my husband and I both been talking about this. It's important because when you think about women, especially,
Hmm.
it- we we have. I'm going to say something that might ruffle some feathers, but I think we've been hurt a lot by feminism. You know,
Hmm.
it's taken us out of our home to work for someone else and to help grow what they're growing when we can be growing something within our own home. Um, and I want to help guide women and be able to do that and accomplish that so that they can, if they want to be at home with their kids, they can have their own thing where they can make it work for themselves and make it the way their schedule, the way they need it to be. And there's some, pitfalls in starting that. And I've been
Hmm.
through starting my own business. I know what it's like. And my husband, he's an entrepreneur. He's started many businesses and had some successes and failures, but you learn from both, right?
Hmm.
And so that's something that God's just laying on my heart to do.
Well, Lori, I'm already excited. If that's a movie trailer, I'm ready tomorrow. So and folks, I got to tell you, we were talking offline as well. Lori has spent time in prayer, her devotion time. So whatever and whenever the time comes, know that it's been committed in prayer. So I will say this: come on, ladies, come come on to the room, and find out what God has put on Lori's heart. So very excited there. Just the principle of ownership for sure is what
Yeah,
she's talking about. Very excited for that, Lori. And I know that that's going to be good no matter what the format ends up being.
thank you. Thank you. Yes, because I can't take credit for it. God's the one that's doing it. He's just using me as his vessel.
Amen to that. Well, folks, we have to let Lori go, right? We just can't stay here for 3 hours. But Lori, before we go, where can people get a copy of the book? Where can listeners reach out to you? Website, social media? What's the best way for folks
Sure.
to get in touch with you?
Yes, so the book is available on Amazon. And I also have a devotional book that wrote a few years ago. If you're
Mm.
interested in that, they can find it there under my author name on Amazon. And then my website, if you just want to put in Lori Bean, my name, that's the easiest way to find me, LoriBeen.com. You'll find my information on my business and the services that I provide people who are going through career challenges and changes. And then social media, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and my handle is at paNASH Coaching, PANASH Coaching.
Folks, you heard it directly from the author and owner herself. We'll have all of Lori's information in the show notes, Fortified Life, podcast.com, jerichoforce.com/podcast. So don't you worry. You will be able to know all things Lori Bean. Make sure you grab a copy of her book. I have, Lori, go ahead and
Oh, sure.
wave that book up. Purposeful Branding. I'm telling you. You want to get your copy, and Lori's laid out an awesome process to walk you through what it means to brand purposefully. Get back to the why. Well, Lori, as we end, is there any just parting words of wisdom you want to leave the listeners with?
Yes, pay attention to the things that you do that you really enjoy most, the things that the things that you lose track of time when you're doing.
Mm,
If you're looking to do something that you're more passionate about, pay attention to those things. Like I said earlier, who does that best serve as well, those skills that you have. And yeah, I don't like saying follow your heart. I don't believe that it's good advice. I'm all about helping people pursue their passions, but following your
mhm.
heart, as we know from Jeremiah, was it Jeremiah 17:9? Is that right? About the
I
heart
think
is
so.
yeah. So yeah, you got to seek God's wisdom. That's the main thing I want to people leave with people who are listening.
Absolutely. Well, Lori, I can't thank you enough for hanging out with us here on the
Yeah, it was
Fortified
fun.
Life. Greatly appreciate it. Folks, I already told you when Lori's like, well, we'll have to, there is no question. She will be back. So if you see another episode, oh, Lori's back. Yep, we have pre-decided.
Well, thank
She
you,
will
Jason.
return. So I look forward because I know that that update is going to be huge, and we'll talk all about what God is doing with
Yeah,
that new endeavor. But Lori, thanks so much for hanging out with us here on the Fortified
you're
Life.
welcome. And go Tar Heels and go Gamecocks.
There we go. Yep.
Go
You see,
Yellow
folks,
Jackets.
the ACC and the SEC can coexist. I don't care what
Yes,
anybody
we
tells you.
can.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for here on the Fortified Life podcast. Again, we'll have all of Lori's information in the show notes. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast for our YouTube audience at the Fortified Life YouTube channel, and then the Fortified Life podcast available on all your platforms of choice: Apple, Spotify, iHeartMedia, iHeartRadio. You can find us. Well, folks, you know how we leave things. Don't compartmentalize your faith and the marketplace. And from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.